34th temporary restraining order issued against Illinois' gun and magazine ban, and we'll see where all of these other cases are ultimately standing. Good morning. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. And Friday morning, as we discussed, anticipating that there would be a fourth restraining order issued against the state's gun ban, that came out of Effingham County. Now, this, again, is a state-level case. It's not the federal cases that are pending in federal courts. But what is ultimately the major trajectory here as we see these temporary restraining orders issued against the state from enforcing the gun and magazine ban? Somebody pointing out on YouTube that it's the 34th day of, actually the 35th day of Illinois' ban on semi-automatic weapons and certain magazines over a certain capacity. There's also the October 1st window opening of the requirement for you to register your semi-automatic guns that the state legislature has deemed assault weapons and has said that they are banned, and still some questions about how that interacts with your Fifth Amendment rights to not incriminate yourself. So what ultimately we have here, we've got thousands now of individuals who are safe from the state enforcing a ban on weapons against them. And this includes gun dealers. So we've got now, at least from the cases that attorney Thomas DeVore is handling, three different cases he has. He has the first Effingham County case, he has the White County case, and he has a second Effingham County case. These cases being heard over first one in Effingham County. That was filed, 7 days or so after the state enacted that. On January 20th, a temporary restraining order was issued 10 days after the state enacted the gun ban. That was in Effingham County. The states then, in the state-level case, appealed that ruling to the Fifth Circuit Appellate Court in Illinois, and then a week later, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that temporary restraining order on the issue of equal protections. Now, I've seen a lot of people, saying, why isn't this all about the Second Amendment? In a way, it is about the Second Amendment even on the state-level cases. Essentially, the argument is that the Second Amendment, you cannot treat people differently when it comes to these types of rights. So equal protections is the argument that's really sticking in the state-level courts. But other arguments that have been made at state-level courts that haven't really been advancing but could still possibly advance deal with how the measure was ultimately passed by the Illinois State House. In particular, the charges and allegations that the measure did not comply with the three readings rule, that the measure did not comply with single subject, that the measure did not comply with due process. Now, the courts have essentially said, at least one of them, White County, said that it did not really appreciate, and I'm just paraphrasing here, how the states went about passing this legislation, not following those processes, which are really more about complete open transparency and the ability for the public to provide as much input as they could. And the public did provide some input by filing witness slips against these measures. When they were filed under one bill, it was about 3-1 opposition to support. Then they filed it under another bill. Again, opposition was 3-1 against support. And then a third version that ultimately passed, opposition was 3-1, if not more. But still, those arguments about the process not advancing. It's the equal protections argument that seems to be sticking with the Effingham County case first issued January 20th with the TRO, the appellate court upholding that TRO, and then White County followed afterwards. Macon County had a separate case filed by attorney Jerry Stocks on behalf of State Representative Dan Calkins and a group called the Law Abiding Gun Owners of Macon County. A judge issued a temporary restraining order in that case. And then on Friday, you had a separate case that Tom DeVore brought forward where the Effingham County judge, essentially, they didn't have to hold a hearing because, well, the circuit courts have to follow what the appellate court's decision was. So since the appellate court upheld that TRO in Effingham County, the Effingham County judge essentially said, yep, we're upholding that here as well. So altogether, at least for divorce cases, the 2 in Effingham County and the 1 in White County, there are 4,713 individual plaintiffs and 148 federal firearms licensees. Those are gun stores. And essentially, those 4,713 plaintiffs can now go to one of those or multiple of those 148 federal firearms licensees of Illinois, and they can purchase semi-automatic guns and magazines of more than 10 for rifles and more than 15 for handguns. The Macon County case has 2,100 members of the Macon County Association that can then take part in sales with gun stores that are part of these cases, not just the Macon County case, but also divorce case times 3, which people are all across the state. It's not just in Effingham County or White County. There are people even here in Springfield that are plaintiffs in some of these cases. So you've got this impacting all across the state. But something else, too, is this is costing you, the taxpayer, money. We'll talk about that a little bit and also review where the federal cases are and a kind of a bingo card of sorts that a gun dealer has put together on their website. We'll talk about that coming up here also. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY. Springfield's News and... Hey, I want to shout out to people listening and watching online. I've had people reach out to me that span across the country that might be former Illinois residents seeing what's going on in Illinois and enjoying the coverage. And I appreciate you guys tuning in and sending those notes. People from Arizona and Pennsylvania and Florida, all tuning in, so do appreciate that. But every morning we've been talking about the state's ban on semi-automatic weapons and the litigation that's been against these laws, not just in Illinois but across the country. We've seen a variety of different lawsuits and different legislation that's been filed and passed elsewhere. So how's this all going to play out, especially after the U.S. Supreme Court last year in a precedent-setting decision against a gun law in New York, which ultimately said that states can no longer use this balancing of public safety to infringe on people's rights. That can't be the standard. The standard has to be text and tradition of the Second Amendment. We're seeing different courts act that way when laying that out. So we've talked about the different cases that have been in state level court. Of course, the Effingham County cases that Tom DeVore brought. Some of the recent filings on Friday, for instance, court reviewing different correspondence for proposed orders, and we'll see that, of course, advance in Effingham County. You also have in Macon County last week different entrances of appearances. In the other Effingham County case, you've got the courts doing what they've got to do. But also in White County, you can see that, at least according to the docket, Tom DeVore has put subpoenas in for a whole host of individuals. So we'll be watching that closely. But all of this, of course, is going to cost you, the taxpayer, because the state is using tax dollars to defend against these legal challenges, not just in state court, but also in federal court. And there's a slew of federal cases that are still pending. And Maxon Shooters, they have a blog post, and they're part of the Federal Firearms Licensees of Illinois lawsuit against the state's gun ban. This is an alliance that's been put together, the Illinois Gun Rights Alliance. And Maxon Shooters, they break down how they're keeping an eye on 6 federal lawsuits against the state's gun ban. And they kind of give you where all these cases are. So the Harrell versus Raoul, that's the Illinois State Rifle Association's case that they have against the gun ban. You also have Langley versus Kelly. That's a case that's been brought out of Crawford County. County, so that case is still pending. That was actually put into state court, but then it was transferred to federal court in an effort to try to consolidate those cases. And there was some interesting maneuvering there, where at first it was thought that the cases would be all taken up by the Obama-appointed judge in that southern district, but the first case that was filed in the federal court just so happened to be the ISRA's case. So that was under a Trump-appointed judge. Also, you've got other cases that are still pending, including federal firearms licensees of Illinois. That's another separate case that's dealing with gun parts and guns, not with the magazines. And we've heard from some of the individuals behind that case as to the rationale there. But you've also got the National Shooting Sports Foundation case. A new one that I've not been watching too closely is the National Association of Gun Rights versus Naperville. That's still pending. And the case that McHenry County State's Attorney Patrick Keneally brought in state level court that was transferred to federal court. So if you want to keep track of that, we will definitely be keeping track of that on our own. But Max and Shooters has a good blog post there of all the federal lawsuits that they're tracking. So state court, federal court, this thing continues to be challenged now, more than a month into the ban being enacted?
From the Fly SPI Studios, take the easy way out. WMAY